This is video number 2 from chapter 11. In this video we're going to be covering dihybrid crosses and using probabilities to solve genetics problems. Alright, so for this you also do need your unit pack, which you probably had out anyway, but in the unit pack we're going to be working through some of the interactive questions together from the study guides at the end in chapter 11. So I would like you to take out and take a look for interactive question 14.3. So that will be the first one that we're going to be working on with a dihybrid cross. Now, dihybrid crosses are where you have multiple traits that you're looking at simultaneously, and you want to know the chances of combinations of these two different traits that you're dealing with in a dihybrid cross. All right, so take a look at interactive question 14.3. In that problem, you're starting out with a pea plant that is tall and purple flowered, and you're crossing it with a dwarf white flowered plant. So we call these true breeding when they're homozygous. So the homozygous or true breeding tall purple flowered plant is being crossed with a dwarf white flowered plant. All right, so this is the parental generation. The generation we're starting with we call the parental generation, so that's P. All right, now in the F1 generation, that's the first filial generation, it's the offspring of this generation, there is only one combination of genes that you can end up with. So only one genotype would be the outcome of this, because this parent has to give a big T, this parent has to give a little t. So you're going to get big T, little t. And this parent has to give a big P, and this parent has to give a little p. You're going to get big P, little p. And so the offspring are going to be heterozygous for both traits. Okay, so that's the F1 generation, and they're going to have the dominant conditions of being tall and purple flowered. All right, so the next thing that Gregor Mendel always did was he took his F1 generation and he allowed it to self-fertilize. All right, so they're still doing sexual reproduction, but the sperm cells are fertilizing their own eggs, and pea plants do that pretty readily. So the F1 generation is being crossed with itself in order to get the F2 generation. All right, and that's what the question is about. It's asking you for the phenotypes and the ratios that are found in the F2 generation. So in order to do this, because it isn't quite as simple of a problem, because this parent can give either big T or little t, and this parent can either give big P or little p, and so there's lots of different combinations that you can end up with here, and they would end up being seen in different proportions. So keep in mind that each parent must give a big or it must give a allele for height and an allele for color, but you can only give one of each. So this first parent here can either give big T, big P, both dominant alleles, can give big T, little p, can give little t, big P, or little t, little p. Those are all the possible alleles that could be combined in a sperm cell or an egg cell. So keep that in mind, and then now work through parts D and E in interactive question 14.3. Pause, and then come back and check your answers. Okay, so here's what you would end up with by doing this dihybrid cross. Keep in mind that the ovum and the sperm has to have, the gamete combinations, and they're going to be the same because it's self-fertilizing. So then you take a look and you put into the boxes, which would be the offspring combinations of genes, and they should all have 4 letters in them. For part E, where you're listing the phenotypes and the ratios, I have circled in yellow the individuals that are dominant for both traits. I have circled in pink the individuals that are dominant for the height and recessive for the flower color. In green, I have the recessive for height and then the dominant for the flower color. And then in purple, I have circled the individual that is recessive for both traits. So if you go through and you count those, you end up with a 9:3 to 3:1 ratio. This is a ratio that wouldn't be a bad idea for you just to go ahead and memorize, just to save you time. It's one that you see pretty often where you have a cross between 2 individuals that are heterozygous for 2 traits, and just keeping track of that 9:3 to 3:1 will probably save you some time. Keep in mind, 9 is dominant for both traits, 3 is dominant for one and recessive for the other, for both of them, and then 1 would be recessive for both traits. All right, so that's how you do a dihybrid cross. This might be the very last time you ever have to do a big Punnett square like this with 16 squares, because I'm going to strongly recommend that instead of going through and using this type of a long process that's fraught with errors, that instead we use probabilities. Okay, the second law of probability states that if you have a combined event and you want to know the chance of it, so a combined event would be an event where more than one thing is happening simultaneously, what you need to do is multiply the chances of those separate events from happening. So with that in mind, give 14.4, interactive question 14.4 a try. Pause and then come back and check your answer. All right, so to solve this problem, you could set up one of those giant Punnett squares, which we've already done. And so just by doing that giant Punnett square that we did in part D of the previous question, we know that the answer to this, we're wanting to know what is the chance that the offspring will be little t, little t, little p, little p. That's the problem. So we could set up that Punnett square, and we know based upon that giant Punnett square that this is going to be 1/16 of the offspring. But we could solve this in a faster, slicker way that is going to be less likely to have errors with it. So in order to do that, you're going to multiply combined events, the separate events, to get the combined event. So first of all, we're just looking at the t's. Okay, so I set up a Punnett squares just for the t's, and I want to know what is the chance that the offspring will be, oh, nuts. Okay, it's back. I want to know what is the chance that the offspring will have the recessive condition. So that's 1 out of the 4 boxes, so there's a 1 in 4 chance that the offspring will be dwarf. And the same thing with the p's. I set up the Punnett square, and I want to know the chance of little p, so it's this box down here. It's a 1 in 4 chance that the offspring will have white flowers. So if I want to know what is the chance that they're both dwarf and have white flowers, I'm going to multiply that, those separate events in order to get the combined event, and the answer is 1/16. Okay, so you can do that way. It's much faster than having to set up one of those giant Punnett squares. All right. All right, so now I would like you to try interactive question 14.5, both A and B. Pause the recording, play it again when you're ready to check your answer. All right, so this problem has you working with 3 genes simultaneously. They didn't even give them names. But the genotypes, I pulled that out of the problem, so I wrote those down. And then what we're looking for is we're wondering whether, or what is the probability of the offspring having all the dominant characteristics. Big A something, big B something, big C something. So those underscores there represent that either one of the alleles could be in that position. We're just wanting to know what is the chance for dominant, so it could be either. All right, so once again, I set up the Punnett squares for the A's, separately from the B's, separately from the C's, and now we're going to figure out what is the probability of this combined event. So the chance of getting big A something is 3 out of 4. 3 out of the 4 boxes have the dominant trait. For the B's, it's going to be, I'm going to use the reduced form of the fractions to make my math easier, so it's a half of the boxes. You could do 2 out of 4, but then you get more math. And then for the C's, all of the individuals are going to show the dominant trait. So it's 4 out of 4, but once again, I'm going to simplify this and say that's just, it's 1. It's all of them. So in order to know the combined trait, combined all of them together, you have to multiply that then. So multiply across the top, multiply across the bottom. It's 3/8 is your answer to the first part of this question. Now part B is a little bit trickier. What you're supposed to be doing for part B is it's the same cross as it was for A, but you're supposed to answer what is the probability that the offspring will show at least 2 traits of these being dominant. All right, so you could do this either the straightforward way or you could do this the reverse way, and in this case kind of thinking in the negative is actually a little bit simpler. So we want to know what is the chance that at least 2 of these 3 traits is going to be showing the dominant trait. Now we know this one has to show the dominant trait. It's the only one that is, it's the only possibility. The other ones have 2 different possibilities. So the only way that you're not going to end up with an individual showing at least 2 dominant traits is if both of these, this one and this one, if both of those are showing the recessive trait. So what is the chance that you end up with little a, little b, that would then be the reverse of the answer. You'd take 1 minus that in order to get the answer. So the chance of little a is 1/4. the chance of little b is a half. So there's a 1 in 8 chance that the individual does not show at least 2 dominant traits. And so the chance that it's going to show at least 2 dominant traits, which is what the question is asking, would be 1 minus 1/8. So the answer is 7/8 for that one. That one's a little bit of an extension question. It's a little bit of a next step question, but puzzle through those and see if you can figure them out. All right, so this is the second of the videos.